You're listening to Lawyer Radio. Real lawyers, real talk, and everything you need to know without all that legal mumbo jumbo. Let's get into it. We have Michelle Suarez here today. She is the Florida entrepreneur lawyer. I love that moniker. That's so cool. And I have to draw attention to your shirt. It says the Anti-Stuffy Business Law Firm. I love that.
Thank you. We're very proud of that slogan. We've been using it since 2017.
And how did you come up with that?
When I left Big Law, one of the things that I hated was how stuffy everything was. So when I renamed the law firm in 2017, I was like, what do we stand for besides representing entrepreneurs? And at the time, I was just thinking, we stand for everything that is the opposite of Big Law. And to me, that was anti-stuffy. So I was like, oh, we're the Anti-Stuffy Business Law Firm. And it just stuck.
I like that. Because I do think most people think of lawyers as being really stuffy. And honestly, they kind of are. So that's kind of why I think that.
Yeah. I remember, and no ill will toward where I used to work. I actually love, the firm and the owners. But I remember the building I used to be in. Everything was like mahogany and like beautifully ornate decorations. And I was like, yeah, that's not me. That's not us. We're like sandals on the beach, like down to earth. That's how most entrepreneurs are. You meet these tech guys and these e-commerce guys, and they're in sandals and t-shirts and jeans. They don't give a if you have marble in the front with lions at the beginning of your law firm. Like, that's not what they're looking for.
I think that's the old guard.
Yeah.
I call that wood look, the mahogany wood. I feel like I'm in a steakhouse.
Yeah, exactly. If you're walking into Morton's.
Yeah, I don't know why steakhouses are all like that, but I totally get it. And I think the younger generation, as the old folks kind of phase out, sorry guys, I don't mean any disrespect, but as the older generations kind of phase out and the new people come in, I think you're right. They just have a really different feel. I think they're looking for something different. When I see the place with the marble, front room, all that says to me is that their fees are really high because they got to pay for that.
Yeah. Totally. That, like, you're just showing off. It's almost like, I'm sure we won't go there. This is a professional podcast, but I'll just say, when you see a guy in that big shiny sports car, you're like, what are you trying to compensate for?
Oh, yes. I think we all know what you're getting at there.
Yeah. I kind of feel that way with the big law firms. Like, what are you trying to compensate for?
And you know what? This is not a stuffy podcast, so feel free to say whatever you want.
Does this mean expletives are permitted?
Yeah, yes, whatever.
Right.
So I'll be very honest. When I think business law, I don't always exactly know what that means. I think of business formations, be incorporated. Should I have an LLC? And what does all of that mean? But I know it's more complicated than that. So I'm going to let you explain really what your firm does.
Sure. So yeah, we do the entity formation and we help people figure out what makes the most sense. Should I be an LLC? Should I be a corporation? In 90% of the cases, maybe more. But more than that, what we do is we serve as outside general counsel. So the reality is most businesses in America are not the top 10% and they're not the tiny mom and pops. They're somewhere in the middle, right? They're probably small, but trying to scale. And they don't have, nor do they want to spend, even if they had it, $200,000 a year on an in-house corporate attorney. They don't need it. And half the time, more than half the time, I know because they hire us, when they have in-house general counsel, that general counsel is still looking outside for specific issues that company is going to face. HR related issues, vendor contract disputes, acquisitions, should they franchise, all of those types of things. Those are actually the things that we deal with day in and day out. So yeah, the entity formation stuff, we do that. And for the most part, it's pretty simple, but I really enjoy and we really pride ourselves on the fact that we handle the more complex stuff like corporate restructurings. How do we franchise? What are the things we need to consider if we're going to franchise? We want to take an injection of capital. What does that look like? People love to say, oh, I'm going to do a friends and family raise. Do you really know what that means? Because if you don't, you may not care right now, but if you become that $10 million company you want to become, guess who's knocking at your door? The SEC. And if you have one auntie who's pissed off because you didn't get them the money back that you promised them, you have a lawsuit on your hands now.
That's like my worst nightmare. I have so much insurance because I'm so afraid of getting sued for something that very innocent that I never even thought, should I have that?
Yeah.
So maybe that's the first thing that you could talk about is what are some of those pitfalls just for the average entrepreneur? Like I consider myself the average entrepreneur, right? Like I don't have a big team. I kind of started all over again. So now I'm rebuilding a new firm, and there's not tons of revenue coming in yet. And Ray, I'm manifesting, and I don't have a big team. And I think that most entrepreneurs are working like that, so
For sure.
what are the kinds of things that you would tell them to just be mindful of?
The most important things, I think, in the beginning, no matter how small you are, you have a business lawyer, even if you're not using them right away, just having them on hand to ask those questions here and there that you may not know, just to avoid a lawsuit down the road. Hugely important. A competent insurance broker. I'm glad you brought up insurance. It's one of the most important things I tell my startups or entrepreneurs that they need to have in their corner. Someone who knows their industry. It can't be an industry agnostic broker. It has to be somebody who specializes in their industry. If I have a construction company that I represent that's expanding, I'm going to send them to a particular type of insurance broker versus if I have a law firm that I represent, I'm going to put them in the hands of another type of insurance broker. And sometimes you might need multiple brokers, but the most important thing is understanding the risk associated as an entrepreneur with the industry that you're in so that you get the right policies in place. And look, you don't have to get them all at once, but if you have a good broker and a good business attorney, they'll tell you, because of what you do, you're in the products liability space. Let's worry about that. You don't have any employees yet. Let's focus on products liability. Once you have employees, get an employer's liability insurance policy. Make sure that these are the exceptions you look for. And we can even work with the insurance brokers to make sure they have the coverage that they need. And then the third person they need in their corner is an experienced, not just CPA, but tax consultant. People always think of, oh, I have someone who does my taxes. At a certain point, that's not enough. You can have someone who does your taxes and your bookkeeping. And at a certain level, you're going to need somebody who does your tax planning, because otherwise you're going to be slapped with a pretty fat bill at the end of the year. And you're not going to know what to do with that.
So is there any guideline for when someone really needs to get more into tax planning? Is there a revenue number?
I will say once you're grossing over 500K and at least over 200K in profit, you better have an experienced CPA in your corner that also does tax planning or has someone who does tax planning on their team.
I'm just imagining all the people now saying, but Michelle, I'm just a little business. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes, some weeks I don't even pay myself at all because I have payroll and you know what it's like.
I get that. I was there. I didn't pay myself as an employee for, I believe, the first 3 or 4 years of my business. I was I was taking enough to survive.
Were you living under a bridge at the time?
Well, I was living in a small little apartment in a not so great area. I made that sacrifice because I refused to dabble in other areas. My friends would tell me, like, why don't you take a family law case? Why don't you take some landlord tenant case? And I knew that I just wanted to work with entrepreneurs, and I stuck to it. I'm glad I did. Because eventually, my reputation preceded me, and those are the types of clients I attracted. But I'll say to the startup, we have some startups still. We've kind of moved out of that space. Now we kind of represent a different profile. But I will say, even to the startups that we still represent, we tell them, like, listen, at the very least, get the proper corporate structure in place. Because, for example, in Florida, depending on the type of business you are, if it's just you're not going to want to be a single member LLC.
Why?
Because there's a charging order remedy, which in layman's terms, what that means is if you have a judgment against your business, and a judgment can be anyone who sues you and wins, right? Somebody slips and falls on your property and now they've got this injury and your insurance isn't enough to cover it. They're going after your company, right? And they can prove at the end of that case and that judgment that they obtained, the assets of your company, your LLC, is not enough to satisfy that judgment. They can now apply for what's called a charging order, which means that they can ask the court to foreclose on your business, meaning dissolve it, which what does that do? Removes that veil of protection of the corporate shell. So that's not a situation that's ideal if you're trying to protect yourself from personal exposure to any liability associated with your business.
That is super scary as a business owner. I will note this is in Florida.
And then you talk with your CPA to make sure the tax lines up, which is not a big deal. So you just set up as a corp. No biggie.
Okay. But for people listening or watching, if you're not in Florida, you should definitely consult with somebody in your state to see if there's something similar going on in your state, because that is definitely something that you would want to be aware of. So I guess for the people that maybe are like I'm going to compare it to me as like someone who just hung a shingle or, I'm trying to think of like maybe somebody just opened up a little boutique. and they're just like, I am not making any money right now. How do I do this? How do I get someone like you to advise me? And how do I get someone who's going to do tax planning for me and all the other things, that we need?
The reality is that you are taking a lot of risk in the beginning and I've seen this happen with people who we've ended up with after going to other so-called business attorneys. It's unfortunate that in the beginning, I wish, and this is something that long-term we plan on building into our firm structure as a philanthropic part of giving back, is to have some pro bono built into our firm, because it frustrates me often to see people that come to us far too late that are now financially successful, but have been put in a situation either by somebody who gave them the wrong advice or they just didn't know any better. So in that case, I would say in the beginning, there is actually a lot of information out there. There are great YouTube videos that, I haven't been smart enough to get around to doing like other business attorneys have. But I've seen some really great ones out there that provide a ton of information about this stuff. There are great entrepreneurial podcasts that talk about how to structure your company, when you should be an LLC versus a corp, depending on the state that you're in. So you really have to invest in educating yourself in the beginning. And there's also SCORE. I forget what the acronym stands for, but they're national. SCORE is an organization that is just for entrepreneurs. And they have attorneys like me go out and put local workshops on that talk about all of these things. What are the things you need to know in the beginning? What do you need to focus on? How can you try to protect your brand until you can afford to get a trademark registered? All of those things. So I think in the beginning, you do have to do a lot of personal time investment until you can afford to hire a competent business attorney.
Okay, that's great. I'm actually going to look them up just for myself and put a link for it in the show notes. But what are some other things? And I don't want to just focus on, small startups, because there's a lot of other people out there with at different phases in their entrepreneurship. So what would you say about the person that is maybe 5 years in, they're doing great? I mean, if they survived 5 years, then they're already ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the revenue is, over 500,000, over $1 million. And they're at a point now, you get to a point in maybe you've experienced this with your firm, where you're not really just the startup anymore. You're really like humming along, and you're not the same firm. It's almost like you were going through puberty, but now you're a grown up.
Oh my God, I love that you said that, because we joke about that all the time in our firm, that we're in the puberty phase, right? We've got pimples. And at our last focus, we have a focus retreat every quarter where we plan our quarterly goals. And then at, the last quarter, we plan the next year. And this last focus retreat, which was in December, which was technically our Q1 focus for 2025, we were all talking about, what? We're done with puberty. Like, I'm over the pimples and the oily skin. Like, we're ready to get to that next phase, early 20s, looking hot, like starting to kind of know what's going on in the world. So yeah, that's a great question, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs that very quickly find themselves in that position. And we know that because we've got clients we've represented since 2017 that we still have, and we've seen their growth. And that is not going to come with a lot of trials and tribulations and sometimes expensive lessons on the way. I would say to those firms that are at that stage, once you see that you're generating enough revenue that you can now reinvest, which you should always be reinvesting back into your company, you need to allocate money for that type of growth and planning. And that is a reinvestment that's necessary. At a certain point, having a business attorney it's more than a luxury, it's a necessity, just like having a competent CPA firm. So
when you say reinvesting back in, though, what do you mean by that?
So when I say reinvesting back in, I mean, okay, now you're at a point where you've got $10,000 a month to play with, right? What are you doing with that money? Well, if you don't have a business attorney, that's one thing you're going to do with your money. Another thing you're going to do is probably look at your marketing and figure out, depending on your industry, what kind of marketing is going to result in further revenue into your firm or more repeat cash flow. And then you also have to look at, do I have the scalability? Is my business scalable at this point? If I were to walk away from my business for a month, is it going to collapse or can it continue to operate? And if it's going to collapse, well, then I'm still a slave to my business. I'm not really a CEO yet. I'm just a manager. So those are the kinds of things that you really want to think about as your company starts getting into that phase where, like us, it becomes a fast moving train that you're kind of just along for the ride. You got to make sure that when those training wheels come off, you've got your helmet on.
Yeah. Having built a firm over the last 10 years, a different firm, I think, one thing when I look back on things, I kind of pick like, well, what did we do really well? What do I think we could have done a little better? I would say one of the things I feel like we could have done a little better that I'm being more mindful of this time around is I think we could have hired people earlier. I think we kind of had this feeling of like, oh, I don't think I can afford that person yet. But then what would happen is it would almost become an emergency. At some point, we'd be like, oh my God, we do need to hire that person. And we'd kind of be in a hurry and we'd just hire somebody fast, which I know the rule is always hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, ideally, right? But in what world when you're an entrepreneur? That's never how it works.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's not realistic. I mean, listen, as an entrepreneur, let's face it, we're putting out fires left and right? We're just trying to keep our head above water. It's really, and that whole 5-year thing, yeah. I want to say year 10. Once you get to year 10, you're like, okay, now I kind of know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So for me, I think that it becomes having the wherewithal to know when you need the help. And yes, not wait that chicken and the egg scenario you're talking about, because that's what it is, chicken and the egg. Well, I need enough work before I can hire this person. We need more contracts to come in because then I'm not going to have the revenue. You can't. You have to, as an entrepreneur, what makes us successful is our resilience, right? So you got to be willing to lose it all at any minute, because that's the reality of a big company or a small company. You can lose it all in any minute.
I love that. That's not for everybody though, but entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
Well, it's definitely not. No, it's not. But what's the famous Michael Jordan quote? You missed all of the shots that you don't take, or whatever it is. And it's true. Michael Jordan, I watched that documentary on him. I think it's on Netflix, and it blew my mind. And I've never been into basketball, but after that, it kind of made me want to get into
it. Actually, Wayne Gretzky said that.
Oh, really? Oh, my bad.
He was the first one, as far as I know, that said that. I'm older than you though, but Wayne Gretzky's like retired, the hockey guy.
Yeah. You saw him speak at a conference last year or the year before. He was amazing.
Oh yeah, you can learn a lot from top athletes. Like
100%.
Like business people.
Yeah, it's the mindset. It's the mindset. There's a book, actually, if I can find it while we're talking, that's all about mindset, and it's by Joyce something. She's a researcher, and it's such an amazing book. My friend Chrissy Schaefer is actually the one who I found out about it by, but anyway, here it is. Mindset. Oh, it's by Carol Dweck.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. And if anybody hasn't read it, they should.
Absolutely. I love that book. I liked it so much on Audible. I bought the paperback and I'm reading through it again. And she talks about so many athletes, and I speak Spanish too, so sometimes my tongue gets twisted. But she talks about athletes, and she talks about, these leaders of these great corporations, both that succeeded and failed, and she ties it back to mindset, and it's resilience. It's that ability to know, look, an example, we signed up with one of these coaching, marketing, whatever law firm growth companies a couple years ago. And I remember going to the conference. We flew out, my business partner, Amanda, and we flew out on whim. And we went to Atlanta. We were in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I mean, thousands. And we were up in the nosebleeds because we didn't pay extra for the seats. We took the free ones. And I remember they put the price point on the screen for the package that we would fit into. And I was like, I don't know how the fuck we can't afford that. Holy shit. Like, how are we going to afford that? But then they put up, this guarantee and their retention rate. And we were at a point in our firm where I was just like, listen, we're either going to sink or swim. And we looked at each other and I was like, let's do it. And she's like, and we went down and we put our credit card and we signed it. And here we are 3 years later with another 3 years on the contract we just signed. And we are growing like crazy and killing it.
I love that. Yeah. I remember one time very early in my entrepreneurship, somebody said, business owners are problem solvers. And I remember, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed to say this. I thought that was so stupid. I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? Well, I think about that all the time now because I'm like, I was so dumb. I didn't know what I was talking about because it really is true.
Yeah.
That's all I do all day long. I have my list of things to do. And then there's all the other stuff that just comes up.
Yeah. You're solving your problems and other people's problems all day.
So I just want to look over your practice areas. I'm just going to, list them here. So general counsel, business disputes and commercial litigation, franchising, private equity and regulation decompliance, contracts, commercial real estate and investments, intellectual property, tech, and commerce. Do you think you'll be adding AI eventually, or is that part of tech?
AI is already part of tech. Not only do we integrate AI to make us more efficient as a firm, and we're constantly looking at every year. And actually this year we're focusing on technology and logistics as one of our overarching themes. But a lot of our clients also rely on AI. So I think that it's like back when the internet was new, right? You got to stay in touch with the technology or it's going to run you over. You can't be afraid of it. I remember when lawyers were freaking out a couple of years ago because of LegalZoom. And I remember when everybody was like, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And I was like, I was a little scared. I was mostly like, this can't be that bad. Sure enough, years later, you know how many clients I've gotten because LegalZoom fucked up?
Yeah, I know.
It sucks for the clients, but it's great for us, for business. You're never going to completely replace humans, I don't think.
I agree with that 100%. I think AI absolutely has its place. And I agree, if you're not using it, you're going to get left behind. But it can't replace a human.
No, you know, and the emotional acuity that you need to be able to understand your clients, AI is not going to be able to do that for you.
Yeah. What problems though do you see for business owners in connection with AI? Like from a liability standpoint?
From a liability standpoint, data privacy is going to be a huge issue in trade secrets because people don't realize if their employees are plugging in their trade secret into an AI machine. I mean, technically, if you get in a lawsuit over a trade secret dispute and they ask you at a deposition where you're supposed to be telling the truth, presumably under oath, oh, do you guys use AI? Oh yeah, we use AI all the time. Oh, what kind of AI platform do you use? Oh, you use ChatGPT? Oh, and you upload your policies that contains the secret sauce into ChatGPT, a public platform that can be subpoenaed and have those records produced, and you can see in the ChatGPT terms that they have a right to use that information. Not a trade secret. You just lost your lawsuit.
Shit. So guys, don't put anything that you consider proprietary into ChatGPT or any other kind of AI. I don't know.
You just have to use it responsibly, right? So if it's a closed platform, like there's a lot of API integrations that, you know, I have not had the time yet, and it's something that is on our agenda when we do our internal firm, like annual CLE update thing, to look into to see if the terms of use of third-party API integrations, if those terms and conditions maintain the privacy of that data, absent a court subpoena or something like that, which would still maintain the confidentiality because trade secret is something that's not publicly available and that you've taken steps to protect. But yeah, I would not, if you're going to upload something into ChatGPT, make it generic. Make it as generic as you can.
And that brings us to intellectual property because your firm also does that.
Yes.
Something that I want to ask you that I don't think is a new question. There's been some debate about it, but I don't know that there's even really an answer yet. But if you create something using ChatGPT, because that's a public forum, right? Is that something that you could, you know, copyright, trademark?
That depends. And that's something that the Copyright Office is still figuring out, that intellectual property attorneys are debating and discussing every single year. Each year I go to an intellectual property symposium put on by the Business Law section of the Florida Bar, which I'm very involved with and is a wonderful organization. And that was, of course, one of the hot topics last year. And sure enough, I haven't seen the agenda for this year's event in April, but I suspect it'll be on there as well because it's at the securities conference I'm going to at the end of February. I think that we don't know the answers yet, just like the SEC didn't know what to do with securities, with, you know, tokens and NFTs. All the securities attorneys like me were out there saying, guys, you can't just offer people coins and think that it's not a security. Like, you're going to have securities implications. And sure enough, the SEC finally came out with some guidance echoing what we all worried about and thought about. I think it's going to be the same in the sense that you're not going to have a clear answer. I don't think in the next 2 years, possibly in the next 5, we will, as to whether that constitutes true copyrights within what you put into AI, because there is a component of it right now that they say is still protected copyright to the extent that you are creating the prompts that you're putting into the ChatGPT. So if the prompt that you're creating is coming from your ideas that you created and then it's spitting out a product, okay, you could argue that that's a copyrighted material, but we don't have enough information yet.
I think the thing that I think of, I guess I get what you're saying, that if it's something really creative and original, if I put that prompt into ChatGPT, then the likelihood that maybe somebody else put the same prompt in it's probably not as likely. But if it's something more generic, then conceivably somebody else, in Canada or wherever could be creating the exact same thing that I'm creating right now on ChatGPT.
Right.
I don't know. And I know that we probably don't have the answer yet, but is it just a matter of who gets over to the copyright office first?
I was just about to say that. And that I still say register it as quickly as you can, right? Because you only have that 90-day period from publication to recover attorney's fees presumptively if you can say that there's copyright infringement. And remember that the Copyright Office isn't sifting through hundreds of thousands of, they're doing a quick cursory review and it seems registrable. It qualifies as copyrightable content. We don't see anything on its face that's already been registered like this. We're going to register it. You're still going to have to prove that, but you want to at least give yourself a stronger case to say that you registered it within 90 days of being published. Not that you can't still recover damages after that period, but if you register within the first 90 days, there's an automatic damages provision and attorney's fees that you can recover.
Okay, and that's federal?
Yes,
So basically
that is federal. We don't have time to get into it, but the Copyright Office also came up with a quicker mechanism of dealing with copyright disputes. So one thing I just want to mention, since your audience caters to entrepreneurs, is make sure you're policing your information. Like if you've got someone out there that you straight up think ripped off your copyright or your trademark, reach out to a trademark, even if it's just for a consult. Just talk to a trademark attorney, talk to a copyright attorney, at least know what your rights are, because if you sit on it too long, they can argue that you waived that right.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to tell people, please don't be afraid to go consult with attorneys. Pay the consultation fee. Please just pay it. Don't be cheap. This is not the place to be cheap because you don't know what you don't know.
Totally.
I consulted with an employment lawyer in the past couple of days, and boy, did she tell me some things that scared the shit out of me that I did not know. And I've been in business for 10 years, and I was like, oh my God, I have not been doing that all this time. Just if you think it's something simple and easy, and please don't take legal advice from ChatGPT.
Oh my God, no, please. I tested it in the beginning, and I asked it a couple securities compliance questions, and it was doing well. And then it fucked up on something. And I was like, machine, what about the amendments that came out in 2021? Well, you should consult with a lawyer. Like, no shit. And I immediately reached out to my team and was like, listen, be careful with using ChatGPT because it's not always accurate.
Oh, it's not. I think there was something in the news where an attorney had written a brief based upon ChatGPT and it actually made up case law.
I saw that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And I was like, this fucking idiot. Like, Westlaw. Just use West. Like, no, don't. Yeah.
I know. It's pretty crazy. So I want to just, we don't have enough time to go into all of these practice areas. Maybe we should have you come back on with a series, but I kind of just want to touch on like each one and like some of the bigger things. So you have franchising on here too. So when you say franchising, like that is very foreign to me. I think McDonald's, I think Dry Bar is a franchise. Others. So do you help people that want to buy a franchise or do you help people that have a business and they want to duplicate it and turn it into a franchising opportunity for other people?
So we help both. Now, as we continue to expand, I suspect that we're going to represent more franchisors than franchisees as conflicts become a potential issue, but we do represent both franchisees and franchisors, and those are two different beasts. Purchasing a franchise is one perspective that we're looking at as a franchise attorney to see because there's not a lot of room for negotiability on those contracts, but the reason that you hire a franchise attorney to review documents for a franchise you want to purchase isn't so that you can negotiate a bunch of things in it. It's really so that they understand what they're getting themselves into, because a lot of times they don't. And then from the franchisor perspective, it's very expensive to start a franchise. So you really need to meet with a franchise attorney to understand. Well, first of all, the franchise attorney needs to understand, why do you want a franchise? How far along in your business model are you? And are you really in the right place in your life cycle to do franchising? Because of the amount of money required, you really need to be in the right place to do it. And it's very heavily regulated on the federal and state level. Every state has their own law that pertains to, well, some don't, but in the absence of that, the federal statute by the FTC sets the bar, right? So this is the minimum that all states must comply with to offer franchises. And then states get to raise that bar a little bit if they want. So there are states that are registration states, they're called, like California, Washington, they're fucking horrible if you want to get in there. I'm sorry. I love California and Washington. It's gorgeous. But what I mean by fucking horrible is like, you really have to cross your I's, your T's, and dot your I's if you're going into those states, because they do not play. They will check you, and your documents have to be right, and they have to be protective. They have to have all the language they require. And why does it matter? Because if you franchise in the wrong way, it's kind of like securities. Those two go very hand in hand in terms of regulation. Rescission is a remedy that's available. And what rescission means is they can cancel the contract and get all their money back, plus attorney's fees. So you're like, oh, well, I sold a franchise and I collected a franchise fee of 20 grand and I made 30 grand in the first year. Now they're trying to cancel and they're suing me. Okay, well, now you're not just on the hook for the 20,000 you collected and the 30,000 in revenue. Add their attorney's fees, and it's not cheap.
When I hear people talk about franchising, it's usually like, it's not, the guy who made McDonald's. It's usually like someone has a really awesome hot dog stand and they're like, oh, I should have hot dog stands everywhere, but I can't run hot dog stands everywhere. I should just franchise them. And then my hot dog stand can be everywhere, but I don't have to actually run it and I'll just make all the money.
Yeah, if it were that easy. If it were that easy. And trademark protection goes hand in hand with that. So I'll say this, anybody who's listening, who's even considering franchising, talk to a franchise attorney and make sure your trademarks are secured, because you can't have one without the other. I mean, you can, but it's very difficult to manage a franchise that way. And it kind of lowers the value of your franchise. You want to have your IP secured.
And when is the appropriate time to talk to a franchise attorney? Is it when you just have an idea and you don't even have a business? Like if I want this hot dog stand, right? And I'm envisioning world domination with this hot dog stand. And don't worry, there's not really a hot dog stand. When do I do that? When I have the idea? Is that too soon? Do I have to make one first?
I think it's too soon. I think it's too soon because you need to almost like beta test your idea. Now, what is not too soon though, if you know franchising is somewhere on the horizon, and I have a company, restaurant that I represent that I've always thought would be and they've been interested in it, either franchising or both, selling frozen food goods in supermarkets with this specific product, and then also franchising the restaurant. And they were smart enough to secure one of their trademarks with another trademark attorney. We just secured their other one. I've been representing them for years. You have to, if you're even thinking about franchising, secure your trademarks early. As great or as shitty as your idea is, if your trademarks aren't protected, you're going to have to rebrand anyway. So get that done early. Meet with the trademark attorney early if you're even thinking you might want to franchise.
I don't know if you feel comfortable saying this, but are there any franchises that come up for you that are like, they're golden? If you have an opportunity or you're thinking about getting into a franchise, do these?
I would say no, not yet. I'll tell you why. Because not necessarily because of my exposure to them, but more because I follow the news when I can in the franchising sector. And, even companies like Orange Theory Fitness, right? Whoever got in early on that, they made bank. And look at them in 2020, they exploded everywhere. And I think I'm pretty sure, I think they went public. And then because they opened so many locations too soon, too fast, they had to close thousands of locations. So to answer your question, it's really hard to spot. I will tell you this, and this has been pretty consistent in the franchising, lawyer news that I read from the American Bar Association and stuff, is in almost every case, the key to a successful franchise is the ability to communicate between the franchisors and the franchisees. There's a great management model in place. The franchisor supports the franchisee. The reason McDonald's was so successful is because they supported their franchisees. They didn't just collect their fee and said, these are the rules you need to comply with. This is the marketing you need to follow. Go. No, they were there for their franchisees. They held their hand. They set them up for success. They didn't just say, you breached your franchise agreement, you go kick rocks. Like, that's not what they did. So if you have a franchise that has that support early on, talk to the franchisees, talk to the existing franchisees. If it's a brand new franchise, I'd wait until they have at least 10, 15 successful locations dispersed throughout different geographical territories, even if it's in one state. Talk to those franchisees that have been members for at least a year or more. See what they have to say.
That really makes sense. I never thought about it that way, but that makes sense because you also want to make sure that, like, if you're buying, the next McDonald's, whatever that is, McFreddy's is going to be successful. How involved is McFreddy's in like all the branding and McDonald's, whether you like McDonald's or not? it's a reliable brand, right?
Mhm.
You know what you're getting when you go into a McDonald's. And that's pretty much true. Whatever McDonald's you go into, you know what you're getting.
Right. It's that consistency of service. It's the consistency of the not necessarily the level of quality, but the consistency of the quality. It's like I don't know that Seasons 52 is a franchise, but it's a decent enough restaurant that's a chain. And any Seasons 52 that I've been to, service is always excellent. The ambiance is the same. It's romantic, it's calm, it's soothing. So it's creating, and that does not happen without a company that's already created that scalability and has provided that management support. So that's what I would look for in franchising for sure. And proven track records. I would not invest in a franchise that's brand new. I know I shouldn't say that because I represent some franchisors that are still somewhat new, but that's the reality.
I'm thinking of do they have Muscle Maker Grill by you? I don't even know.
I have not seen one of those, no.
I kind of think that was a franchise and it was great. It was like, they had all these keto friendly meals or like protein friendly meals. And it was really good for a while. And then it just got shitty and I don't even see them anymore. So I think that might be an example where there weren't that many and they got popular.
Yeah.
They blew up and then just fizzled down.
Yeah, because if you grow too fast, and that's not just franchising with any business model. If you grow too fast and you lose that pulse on what made your business successful, whether it's the quality of the product or the quality of the service or the uniqueness, that's going to be your ultimate demise. You've got to keep solving that problem that you started to solve when you became an entrepreneur in the first place.
I think it feels like sometimes, how when you, I'll just use SEO people, like there's a lot of SEO businesses out there. They start out really great. And then all of a sudden it's like, you just feel like you're on a life raft in the middle of the ocean and they're gone. You're like, what happened? We started out so good and now you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel like
definitely.
a lot of businesses do that. Like they get really good and then they just kind of like think they can coast.
Yeah. And sometimes it's unintentional, right? Like I think sometimes they're growing so fast that they almost forget how they started in the first place. And it's like, and that's the hard part of being an entrepreneur. It's how do you scale while keeping that same quality that you had to begin with that made you successful in the first place? And I don't know that it's an easy answer or solution for any entrepreneur.
In my own experience and from coaching that I've had in the past, I think you have to, whatever business you go into, we all want to make money, but I think you can't go into something just to make money. Because if
100%.
you love it, it's not sustainable. I mean, I've had this experience in my own life and I see it now. I see it more clearly. You have to be doing something that you really love. It can't just be about the money.
No, 100%. And I know people hear that and they're like, people say that. That's so cliche. No, it's not. Because if you don't love what you do, it's going to trickle down to your employees. It's going to trickle to the end consumer, whoever that end consumer is. They're going to feel that your energy is low because you're not passionate anymore, which is why, back to your original, I wish I would have hired sooner. I agree, because take the shit off your plate that takes away from that energy. I fucking hated billing. When my business partner joined in 2020, the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, I was so glad. I had clients I hadn't billed in 6 months because I fucking hated doing it. I loved doing the work. I loved being there for my clients, but I hated sending out invoices. That's just not my strength. Oh, yeah. Get rid of the shit you don't like doing quick and do the stuff that I agree with you makes you passionate.
No, I agree with you. That's great advice for any business owner is figure out where your real brilliance is, your talents, and what you really love to do, what lights you up. And I get it. You can't do that from day one, but
right.
You should be moving in that direction. Know what you want to do, know where your real talents are, and try to do mostly those things. And especially the stuff you hate, find some way to outsource that. It doesn't even have to be hiring an employee, which brings up a whole slew of other things. It could be, a service. Like right now, it seems like there's a service for everything. There's some kind of fractional coach or fractional something for everything. Like if you don't want to put the toilet paper on the holder, like there's a business that will do it for you. Find them.
It's so true.
So the two more that I just want to touch on, mostly because I kind of just want an explanation of what it really is and who needs it for the people that are listening. Do they need it? Please explain to me. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I don't exactly know what this is, but what is private equity? And I guess regulation compliance.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really glad that you asked because it's something that comes across our desk so often, and people don't even realize they're dealing with it. So private equity is everything that's not a publicly traded company, which is everyone else. So if you're a small business and you're borrowing 100 grand from mom and dad to become a member of your business, you technically just dealt with a security. And that is private equity in most cases. Private equity is the money that gets pumped into a business to help it operate. And that money is usually pumped in by people that aren't expecting anything but their money back, plus hopefully some profit. Right? In most cases, when you're in that situation, you're dealing with what's called a security, which I won't get into. Even with attorneys, it can be daunting and boring unless you're a securities attorney. But in short, you really need to be careful when you're dealing with situations like that, because while hopefully in most cases mom and dad won't sue you, when you're dealing with anyone else, everything is fine until it's not. And so if you have someone that's loaned you money or given you money, in most cases given you money to invest in your business without having any involvement in it at all, and they're expecting some kind of return, and you don't do things properly the way that you're supposed to, they can sue you for rescission in any state under the federal laws under 10b-5, which is securities fraud for material misstatements or omissions and failure to comply with securities exemptions. But essentially, if you're going to take money from people, you better know what you're doing, and it's not cheap. A raise under Reg D, Regulation D, which is the main exemption that people rely on in private equities and security. And private equity, by the way, in most cases, when I'm talking about private equity, I've got 3 different PE deals I'm working on now. Private equity in most cases are sophisticated people. But when I talk about Regulation D compliance and securities, I'm talking about those smaller businesses that don't realize they're dealing with these things when they are.
When are they? And is that federal law or is that specific to Florida?
It's both. It's federal and state. So you've got federal laws and what are called blue sky state laws that are implicated. So the biggest risk is getting sued by that investor to get their money back, plus attorney's fees. Not to mention, on a larger scale, if you're talking about multi-million dollars, you're now drawing attention from the SEC, which it is a crime as well.
Oh my God. Now there's more things to worry about, Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay. So just maybe like the really like Cliff's Notes version of this conversation, because I feel like I really could have you come back on here and talk about each one of these things separately. If you are a business owner and anybody has given you money to help you with your business, that's when some of these things may be implicated.
Make it a loan, hire an attorney, have them do a promissory note. So now they're treated just like any other creditor of a business that's privately lending you money. It does not have the same, it can have securities implications, but in most cases we can design it such that it doesn't. So definitely talk to an experienced business attorney. Question your business attorney. If you're talking to them, this has happened to me, I've seen it, and it scares the shit out of me, and your business attorney doesn't know the difference between when they don't have to practice in securities, but if they know it's implicated, then that tells me they're a good business attorney, because then they're going to call in someone who does. But structure it as a loan instead. Have somebody loan you money. You do a promissory note to loan you money for the business for X amount of time. Come up with when they're going to pay you back, how much, if it's going to have interest. Don't make them a member of the company, because guess what? You're married. The second they become a member of your company, I love when people come to our firm and they're like, well, they're a silent investor. We always laugh. We're like, that doesn't exist.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
That's not a real thing, guys.
They give you money, but they don't show up to work every day. That's what I think it
They're
means.
a silent investor. Okay.
Means they don't run anything or make any real decisions. So
Right.
they don't
Right.
meddle. That's what I think of it as.
It means that's a lawsuit coming down the pipeline that we're going to unfortunately have to charge you a lot more for to defend, because lawsuits are not cheap.
No, they're not. Lawyers aren't cheap, people.
No, but you know what? If you spend $5,000, right, to have a business attorney draft the proper operating agreement, draft the proper promissory note, you're like, shit, I just spent $5,000 and I'm a new company. Well, honey, we just saved you $500,000 in the long term if this turns into a show. So you're welcome. Like, really, we're trying to save you money down the road. Litigation makes far more money.
I'm just thinking of a situation when like many years ago when I started like my very first, I went out, hung a shingle, like right out of a job that I had working at a law firm, and my boyfriend loans me money for it. And we put it in writing, And you'll laugh at this. But really, I shouldn't have done this because things could have gone horribly wrong. We're still together, so it's all good. We just put like, I think how much he gave me, and just like that there was an expectation to pay it back. And every time I would give him a little bit of money towards it, we'd write it down and like keep track.
That's a contract. That's enforceable.
But it was ironclad. Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because it said ironclad agreement on the top. Which my boyfriend wrote, and he would always say, "We have an ironclad agreement."
Did you guys do that as a joke, or was that?
No, it was a joke.
Okay.
Gave it a little name. We call it ironcladdy.
Listen,
We'll talk about ironcladdy.
when my wife and I first started dating, I remember she thought it was so clever. I wish I have to have this somewhere. She came up with a little contract that had things that I cannot talk about on here as to like what expectations were.
Those are not enforceable, I'm guessing.
I don't think they are. I need to talk to my family law attorney friends because we're married now. I'm pretty sure they're not enforceable. But yeah, I mean, I think it's smart actually that you did that and you put it in writing. Thank God it did work out. I actually had an ex who I don't know if he still is, but he was an attorney. And God, I was dumb and entered into business with him, and we had a credit card, but I documented the shit out of everything. I'm like, I'm paying you, you're selling me back your shares, like da 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 da. Thank God that worked out. But looking back, the things I know now, it scares me. Entrepreneurs really need to at least have a consultation, because you don't know what you don't know, and you can prioritize. All right, first I need to worry about setting money aside for my trademarks. Then I need to set money aside to do employer policies, things like that. Like we can prioritize what they need.
Okay. And then the last thing you have that you do commercial transactions. Do you mean like real estate closings, things like that?
Not real estate closings. We do real estate syndicates. So these are like private equity funds. So basically you've got a guy that has a lot of connections with developers and people with a lot of money that are called accredited investors, and they want somewhere to put their money. And this guy knows the right construction company, knows the land developers, knows all the people in the right places, and he sets up a real estate syndicate to develop property and, give his investors returns. Those are the types of real estate transactions we deal with. Commercial leases we review regularly all the time for our businesses. We do not do closings, not yet. That is something that we outsource to experienced real estate attorneys.
Okay, so you practice what you preach, you do what you know, and
absolutely
refer people out when it's something that you don't know.
We refer a lot of work out because of that. We don't dabble.
This has been so great. I'm so glad that we met, Michelle. I'm going to be in Florida soon, and we're going to have to get together. You're in the Miami.
I love that. I'm in downtown Fort Lauderdale.
It'd be great if we could get together while I'm there. But for people that are listening, you've been listening to Michelle Suarez. She's the Florida Entrepreneur Lawyer, and you can find her at floridahentrepreneurlaw.com. And I'll also put links to your social media platforms and your contact information for anybody that wants to reach out to you. Maybe you can help them with their business.
Thank you. That sounds great. I appreciate it. And I'd love to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me anytime you want. And definitely let me know when you're down here.
I will.
You're listening to Lawyer Radio, the official podcast of Wolf Esquires. Follow us on Instagram at Wolf Esquires. If you like what you heard, subscribe and share. And if you need a lawyer who actually gets it, you know where to find us. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It's not legal advice, and listening doesn't make us your lawyers. If you need real legal advice, call a lawyer, preferably one who knows what they're doing.